Hello, I'm Jordan. I'm going to do another tag today. This one was created by Mark at Book Time with Elvis, who has proven himself to be a master at creating tags, so keep them coming. And I was kindly tagged by Tom of Tom LA Books, who seems to have taken a bit of a break uh, from his wonderful Divine Comedy read along in order to do a few tags, which is great because his answers to tags are always very eclectic and interesting. So the name of the tag is the Around the World in 8T Prompts tag. And the first prompt is theater. Do you read plays? If so, tell us about one of your favorites. I'm going to have to, of course, I'm going to go with Shakespeare for this. And my personal favorite Shakespeare play is King Lear, but I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the late romances, which are the plays that he wrote at the end of his life. That's Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. And other than The Tempest, I feel like these are a little bit underappreciated. But I'm also just very partial to them. I think they're fantastic. I love them. I find them, as you can see, I return to these plays quite a bit. I find them very comforting. I think because they're just so kind of dreamlike and whimsical and funny at times, and each one is built around a final scene of recognition and reconciliation and forgiveness that I just find extremely powerful and moving in a way that only impossible fantasies can be moving. So I highly recommend checking out the late romances if you haven't read them and you're a fan of Shakespeare, and all five of them, not just The Tempest. Um, Number two is travel. Sadly, we can't travel these days, but do you have a favorite travel writer or travel book to take away on armchair adventures? I don't. To be honest, travel writing is very low down on my list of interests as far as reading. It just, to me, it sounds very boring. But I'm also, this might be sacrilegious, but I don't really like to travel all that much. I have a very narrow, boring, predictable life, and I kind of like it that way. But to be fair, I haven't ever actually read any travel writing, as far as I know. So if anyone has a recommendation for some travel writing that you think would work on someone who is not familiar with that kind of thing, let me know. I'd be happy to give it a try. Three is time. What book took you the longest time to read? Why was that? That's actually a book that I'm still reading, and that is the Bible. I decided that 2021 would be the year that I finally read the King James Bible in its entirety. And I've been reading it all year, and I recently finished the book of Job, which it's certainly my favorite book of the Bible so far. I absolutely loved it. I just thought it was so haunting and powerful. I'm still kind of digesting it. But this also seemed like an appropriate answer because maybe Midrash is approaching. And even already a month in advance, there have just been so many fantastic videos and so many great discussions in the comments field. It's really reminded me of why I love BookTube and so much, and why it's great to get involved. If you haven't, comment. At the very least, comment. Um, Number four is traditional fairy tales and nursery rhymes. What are some of your favorites, and what are some you would not think suitable for kids today? I love fairy tales. This is my copy of Grimm's, and I think you may agree that this somehow manages to be both very pretty and extremely tacky. Uh, but look at that. That's gorgeous. I love that. Um, but yeah, I absolutely love fairy tales. I'm still kind of new to them, so I've only read a fraction of what's in here. But one thing I've noticed is that there's kind of certain situations and themes or formula that repeat throughout this book and different stories. And one of the formulas that I really like is the kind of the story of the young woman who marries against her will um, a kind of scary stranger, and kind of has to use her wits to trick her way home. And for some reason, those stories, I just love those stories. I think maybe because for me, they're about the way we kind of have to use our wits to reconcile ourselves to a world that is often very scary and mysterious. But maybe that's bullshit. Maybe they're just good stories. That's kind of what's great about fairy tales, is that they're allowed to just be stories. It's just pure, kind of aimless narrative, which is very refreshing. I love these. Oh, and as far as suitable for kids, most of the stories I've read in here, you could argue are not suitable for kids. But I would also argue that kids are tougher than we give them credit for. And also, I think there's a part of them that really like being scared and disturbed. So I think we do a disservice by Disneyfying these stories too much. I think they knew what they were doing. Um, Five is tasty. Food, glorious food. What are some of your favorite books about food? I'm gonna have to pass again here. Couldn't think of a single book I've ever read about food. Tom held up a book about the history of bananas, I believe, which sounded quite interesting. So maybe I'll give that one a try at some point. Six is terrible. Who is a truly terrible, that is nasty, but memorable character that stands out for you? Mark mentioned the wonderful answer of Iago from Othello, which is great, of course, but I'm not going to repeat him. I'm going to go with a character from The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, or as Jack over at the Rambling Raconteur calls him, Henri James. um, and that's the character of Gilbert Osmond, who is kind of the villain of the book. He's basically a con man who is trying to seduce the main character, Isabel Archer, in order to acquire her fortune. And he's just a sleazy slime ball kind of character, and which is nothing in itself, but what makes him most so memorable, I think, is that it's effective. Somehow he does manage to seduce Isabel, who's a very highly intelligent, vivacious, vibrant character. So it's just a very unsettling kind of paradox at the heart of the book as to how he's able to do this. Anyways, number 7 is truth. The truth is often stranger than fiction, they say. Give us some examples of this from your extensive reading. I don't know how extensive my reading is, especially in nonfiction, but I have been getting more into it recently. And I'm going to mention a book here called Son of the Morning Star by Evan S. Connell, which is a book that was recommended to me by Steve Donahue. And it's amazing. It's just a masterpiece of history writing, as far as I can tell. Not that I'm an expert on the subject, but it's about George Custer and the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And it's just written in a highly unusual way. It seems to me it's non-linear and kind of impressionistic, and it just has such a strong narrative, kind of novelistic voice, which just really blew me away. But anyways, there is a digression in that book about a woman who lived on an American frontier town. Frontier, I think it's like a fort town, for several years, I believe, for many years. And she worked as, I think, like a washerwoman or something. And she was married a couple times, I believe. And then one day while her husband was away, she suddenly died. And while her body was being prepared for burial, it was discovered that she was, in fact, a man. And when her husband came back to town, this discovery was revealed to him. And either he, by some miracle, had not noticed that his wife was a man, or he was just so mortified by the discovery that he eventually ended up hanging himself in a barn outside of town. That is a fabulously odd story, so I think that certainly counts as truth is stranger than fiction. And then 8 is tag, and for this you're supposed to make up a tag using T. And the tag that, not prompt, you're supposed to make up a prompt using T. And the prompt that Tom came up with is 20th. What's a book that gave you a good description or idea of the 20th century? I'm going to go with Underworld by Don DeLillo, which is not a book that I loved, to be honest, but I did think it had a very interesting structure in that it moves backwards in time. It starts in the late 90s, I believe, and it moves back to the early 50s, I think. And it has a huge cast of characters, and it all revolves around a baseball. It kind of follows this baseball through all these people's lives through all the years. And like I said, while I didn't love it, I thought it was a very effective kind of mosaic of America in the second half of the 20th century. So, excuse me, that's what I'm going to go with for that. And the T prompt that I'm going to come up with is it's a little morbid. I'm going to say terminal, and that's name a book that deals with illness. And I'll tag a couple people. I'm going to tag what page are you on, and I'm going to tag Pete's Pensive. So, anyways, that is the Around the World in 8T prompts tag. And thanks for watching. Hope you have a good day.